So the customer's picking up the pastry van tomorrow, and I just decided to park it in my lot. You know, we did the test drive in the morning, everything went perfect. I just went to movie here, boom, check engine light popped right on, and P2196 O2 sensor signal bias stuck rich bank 1 sensor 1. Unbelievable. So I'm going to record this and then look at the freeze frame, see what the heck was going on. So here's the freeze frame data. Like I said, I just started it, pulled it forward, put it in reverse, was backing up into this parking spot, and boom, it popped on. So open loop fault, fuel rail pressure 840, that's perfectly fine. Equivalence ratio is 0.8. So the oxygen sensor is saying it's very rich. Cold start. Open loop fault. 7.8% long term. And once the code tripped, it cuts the short term to 0. So the short term must have been minus 30. Like we've seen before. Downstream sensor is not alive. You know, it's still warming up. But look at that. Oxygen sensor current minus 0.8 milliamps. 0 miles per hour. Crazy. Let's look at the live data right now. I'm sure the problem kind of disappeared. Equivalence ratio 0.72 minus 0.1 milliamp, or 1 amp, minus 1 amp on the oxygen sensor. Holy crap. It's super rich. It's starting to run like garbage. Let's see, what if I shut the engine off? Turn it back on. Minus 2 amps? You gotta be kidding me, 0.6? Running super rich. Okay. Let's clear the codes out. Alright, clear fault code. Yes. Read the live data again. Equivalence ratio, coolant temp, fuel rail pressure, long and short term trims. Engine fault service now, right away. Right away. Minus 25% in the short term. Equivalence ratio is back up. That's just blows my mind. Why? Fuel rail pressure is fine? Why are we at minus 25 right now? Wow, it's really not happy. Look at that. Equivalence ratio is now 2. Running like total garbage. Okay, probably because it's in limp mode. Let's see what code it said again. P0106. Unbelievable. Alright, let's clear them out again. Yes. Live data. This is just blowing my mind. Honest to goodness. Okay, are we all good right now? Engine's off. Intake manifold absolute pressure 15.2. Why is it reading 15.2? Not 14.5. Let's see, start it up. Look at that, minus 30. 7.4 on the map. You cannot get this equivalence ratio back to stoichiometric. Let's see, raise the RPMs a little bit. Look at that, 0.7. Way rich. It's still trying to take away fuel. So our map is all over the place, isn't it? Eight PSI. It's supposed to be like 4. That's the main input. So do we have a weird map sensor? Insanity. Let's mess with the connector under the hood. Alright, so here's the map sensor. I'm just gonna wiggle it and see what our map reading does. I mean, is it a PCV problem? Because with the engine off, it was reading 15. It's basically engine fault right away with the key on. 15.2. I don't like that. Let's see, unplug it. 36.9. Plug it back in. 14.0. 13. Is it a bad pin fitment? Are those spread open? .14 instead of 15.2. Okay. This might explain everything. Let's start up. There we go. Back to 4. Now about 7. See, now we're in control, like minus 10, that's fine. Equivalence ratio is fine. Okay, that seems to be normal. Put it in gear. A little bit of load. Trims are perfect. Engine off. 14. Okay, so I like that. Let me check the pins on that connector at the map sensor. Maybe they're just spread open, and after a few drives, maybe the ground is a little, gets a little weak. Then it shows the wrong map pressure and sets these codes, and it obviously runs rich and thinks the oxygen sensor is running too rich. Pretty crazy stuff. I think we can take care of this right now. Alright, so the only thing I can think of is terminal fretting on this connector. Now this whole assembly, you know, the engine's vibrating. This is just hanging out. So I guess over time this can happen. But let's prove that with some AES wave adapters. So I have the male and the female, and you know, that's a nice tight fit. Now let's put this on the actual map sensor pins, and the drag is about the same. So this pin is equivalent to the pin inside the sensor. Now what about the female pins on the connector? I'm putting this in, and you would think that's enough drag. There's definitely less than if I put it in this one, like a lot less. Sometimes, I mean, you have to put it in like almost all the way, and then it'll depress the little spring. So these pins, they have like an internal spring. You can see from the bottom right here. When you put that in, that spring compresses, and that should, in theory, keep the terminal tight. But doesn't look like it's doing enough. So I want to see what it takes to preload these pins. We'll do them one by one. Put a little magic, you know, deoxit. You don't want to spray the weather pack. The deoxit will destroy weather pack. I learned that the hard way. But just a little bit on these. You know, just put it on here and slide it in and out. And then we'll plug it back in. We'll see what the reading is. That should take care of it. Okay, so I messed around with it a little bit. If you push the tab in from the top, that is the best way to preload these pins. And now, see, the drag starts from here versus all the way in to the very end. So it starts here, and there's drag all the way through. Okay, versus the last like millimeter. So let me get some deoxit. We'll clean these up, reinstall the connector. So there is a trace amount of oil in this weather pack, which is interesting, kind of the same thing that we found on the coolant temp sensor. I wonder if there's oil getting into this harness. And that's causing some issues. I mean, that's crazy that it's going through the insulation along the copper of the wire and then ending up in these connectors. I mean, it's all over my fingers. See all that brown stuff? It doesn't look, you know, oil soaked like the coolant sensors, but still there's definitely some residue on that pin. So that could definitely mess with contacts. You tighten these up, clean these up, blow that out, reinstall it. Alright, so while looking at scan data, I want to plug this sensor in, the map sensor. So here's unplugged 36 psi, and right there is 14. So it has another, you know, that's pretty far for the pins to seat. It's at 14. Do a little wiggle check. No issues. Let's see if there's any DTCs set. Okay, just one permanent code, P2196. And let's read live data, fire this thing up, see if anything's vibrating. I mean, you know, how else do you explain this fault? Alright, here we go. That's the cat warm-up. Minus 21, minus 18. Yep, 4.5 psi, so shouldn't say any faults there. We're definitely stoichiometric. This is normal warm-up. Okay. Raise the RPMs a little bit. So 4.5 on the map. This is fine. Okay? I guess we'll take it for another test drive. Blows my mind. But at least we'll know what's setting the P0106. Map reading that's not 14 when the engine's off. Yep, no new codes, that's permanent code. Alright. So a question that I have is, how is oil getting into this harness? We've seen it on the coolant temp sensors. We saw on one pin the 5-volt reference on the map sensor. Well, it has to be either engine oil or transmission oil. And I unplugged the transmission connector here. That looks pretty clean. And the other end, right there. Yeah, I don't see oil dripping out of that. That seems to be fine. What else is there? There's the oil pressure switch, just a single wire. That's buried, obviously, up there. That green thing up there. Man, this is impossible. There it is. Single wire. That looks clean. What about up top? The only thing I noticed was this cam sensor. See, I have it unplugged. This is all oily and grimy. This plug, the cam sensor, looks pretty oily in there. So could oil be traveling up through the cam sensor, through the harness? You know, 5-volt reference is probably shared with the map sensor. The ground is probably shared with the coolant temp sensors. Could this be a problem? I guess it could be. Yeah, looks pretty bad, huh? But would it explain any of the symptoms? I don't think so. Unlikely. Alright, so we're in the pastry van again. Next day I told the customer, hold up, we're not done with this thing. Something doesn't add up. So, engine's off. It's cold. 14.9 intake manifold absolute pressure. Do we believe that? 885 on the fuel rail pressure. I don't know. I think it should be less than 14 because we're at 1200 feet. Now, it is a nice day, so maybe, you know, is 1 psi gonna make it or break it? I don't like that, but let's fire it up, see what happens. Warming up. Long-term term is minus 20. Short-term is going up to plus 14. We're in control. let's take it for a test drive, come back and shut the engine off, see what the map reads. So even right now, minus 14 and minus 10, that's minus 25 degree or 25% on the fuel trim. I don't like that. This should be, I think, less than 5. Should be like 4.5. Alright, well, let's take it for a spin. Okay, so finally the long term decided to correct. Now we're in single digits. Long and short term. So right now it's driving perfect, but will it stay that way? I have a feeling that it won't. Alright, so far so good. Looking at the readiness monitors, the only one that's not ready is fuel system monitor. That one is important. Has to do with the fuel trims and the map sensor and everything else, so that's not ready yet. Read fault code, no fault code stored. Live data. Let's graph barometric pressure, engine RPM, fuel rail pressure, and equivalence ratio, manifold long-term, short-term. Okay, let's try that. Okay, so we're at 4.7 right now on the map. That looks fine. So let's shut it off and turn it back on. So barometric is 13.9, map is 14.06. Remember, we started with 14.9. So that's very concerning. You know, right now that's believable. It's within like 0.1 psi of barometric. It should be exactly the same. When the engine's shut off, these two should match on each key cycle. So, you know, our fuel rail pressure, I guess, is increasing because the rail is hot. Fire it up. Okay, seems to be happy. Minus 7, minus 8. Let's raise the RPMs a little bit. Okay, so this is normal. This is all good. So we have to get the fuel monitor set and keep monitoring the map. Each time the engine's off, key on, that should match barometric. I think that's, and if it doesn't, we have to figure out why. Is it a 5-volt reference, ground, or signal problem? Or is the brand new sensor bad? I don't think so, but anything's possible. You know, if the 5-volt and the ground check out, you know, it's a pull down design. If we unplug it, it'll go, the signal will go to 5 volts or whatever, 5.7, and that's like 36 psi. It's a pull down sensor, pull down signal. Now, we'll just keep going. Park it, let it do another soak, you know, cold soak, and then, or hot soak, start up again, start up tomorrow morning when it's cooler, see if the map is consistent. Okay, so we're back on the lane. Now we're at 6 psi in park, minus 10, minus 7, minus 15. So long-term learned there. Is this too high? So I don't like this. We're not single digits anymore. Interesting. What if we shut it off and turn it back on? There we go. 14.94 instead of 14.0. Something's up with this map sensor. Something is absolutely wrong with it. Look at that, minus 16 in the long term now. Okay, we're having a problem. Minus 30%. Map is too high by a lot. Look at that, minus 25. Minus 28. Look at that, we're rich. The problem is happening right now. Let's get to the shop and do some measurements. Okay, so we're at 14.94, keys on, engine off. Let's just tap on it. Slightly wiggle the wires. Slightly wiggle the harness. It should be 13.9, it should not be 14.9. Let's, I'm going to try to back probe these wires. Well, we don't want to disturb the connection. Oh look, 15. That's wrong. That's going to set a fault. That's crazy. So I don't want to shut the key off. We're going to do our testing right now. Look, we're almost up to 16. $16.1. Is it going to be a... See, if I unplug it and plug it back in, will that change? We're seeing the problem. That's the key. Okay, so I'm on the ground wire. Guys, we have 300 millivolts on the ground wire. That's a problem. That's a big problem. Let's bypass that ground. And how do we do that? Well, we just connect that to ground. We can put a test light in there, whatever, and see if that signal drops to 13.9. This is insanity. So we're going to go from ground here, and we can go to the signal wire at the meter or at the probe, doesn't matter. Let's see what happens to our map sensor. There it is. That's good. 13.9. We found our problem. $300 millivolts. Let's do a direct jumper instead of a test light and see what the sensor reads. So we're definitely on the right track. This is crazy. Alright, let's do a direct jumper from here to ground. The meter should read 0. Absolute 0. Okay, 13.5 psi. That is absolutely amazing. So we're not done, but we're close. We finally, after 2 weeks of solving problems, finally got to the root cause of this problem. The intermittent, now it didn't stall out, but 300 millivolts, 15.3. Okay, let me take a couple pictures, send this to the owner, and then we'll see where that ground goes. It has to go to the computer. So does the computer have background? Alright, so I'm going to shut the key off and we'll see what happens to the ground voltage. This could cause all kinds of problems, including high pressure fuel pump driver. Let's see, when the computer shuts off, that should go to, boom, 0. Okay, I like it. Love it, love it, love it. So I'm wondering now if the ground is shared with the fuel rail pressure sensor. So it's the middle wire. Let's take a look at some diagrams. We're so close.